The Australian state of New South Wales intends to pass some of the toughest gun control laws in the country, following last week's terrorist attack at Sydney's Bondi beach. Other states are expected to follow suit, while the federal government plans to launch a buyback of weapons. Bloomberg's Paul Allen joins us now with more. So, Paul, first off, how much public support is there for such measures?
Yeah, the support is fairly overwhelming, Avril. There was just a poll in one of the local media outlets today, a resolve poll of 1,000 people, found 74% support for further tightening of gun laws, so that's fairly comprehensive. The New South Wales government is proposing a number of changes, including limits to the number of firearms an individual can own. The dead gunman, Sajid Akram, owned 6. It would also limit open-ended licensing and make a gun licence a requirement would be to be an Australian citizen. Now, the expectation is this gets passed before Christmas, so in a couple of days. It did clear its first hurdle in the New South Wales Parliament last night, and as you mentioned there, other states and territories are seen following suit as well. On the federal level, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, last week announced a buyback of firearms, the biggest since the Port Arthur massacre back in 1996. And that incident sparked the initial toughening of gun laws back then, and that's been credited with preventing events like you see on your screen there for pretty much the past 40 years. But one of the questions doing the rounds of those opposed to this tightening of gun laws is, well, were the existing laws adequate? Now, with that in mind, we want to get to our next guest now, Samara McPhedran, a Principal Research Fellow at Griffith University, who focuses on firearm-related injury and gun policy. Samara, thanks a lot for joining us. And in the shakedown after last Sunday's terrible events, a number of factors have emerged. As I mentioned, the gunman Sajid Akram had 6 weapons. He owned them legally, but 3 of them he bought on the same day, and 2 of them were identical. That's not meant to be legal. And he also had a firearms license, which took 3 years to get, which he probably shouldn't have, considering his son lived with him, and his son was the subject of a spy agency investigation. So that's a long way of asking, were the existing laws enough? Was it really a problem of enforcement?
Well, more and more, as more facts come to light, it does appear that there's been a catastrophic failure of enforcement with the existing laws. The laws that have been in place in New South Wales for many years on paper were more than sufficient to have covered this situation and should have prevented that individual from obtaining a licence. Now, the fact that there are so many irregularities in the licensing process, the fact that it took an abnormally long amount of time between the application in 2020 and when it was issued in 2023, all of this raises some very, very serious questions that so far the New South Wales government isn't answering. And certainly this does appear to indicate that the existing laws were sufficient, but that we do need to understand what went wrong with the administration and enforcement of those.
Why is it then that you think the national conversation at the moment is about the toughening of gun laws rather than more effective enforcement of the existing laws?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, when events like this occur, we seem to fall back into a very predictable script where politicians make very quick political announcements. Those announcements get headlines, and they deflect attention away from bigger problems and from some very serious social issues in this particular instance. So, although this is a very typical response by politicians, it is very much about politics and deflection rather than calmly and carefully going through the facts and working out exactly what went wrong. Unfortunately, we've seen this type of response over and over again. And once again, here we are having this same conversation and going down this same path that we've gone down so many times before.
What needs to change, and what are you seeing in terms of what's at the heart of these social issues that are prompting lethal violence?
What we've seen over so many years and across the political spectrum, this isn't a left or right issue, but for such a long time, we've seen politicians dividing us. We've seen the rise of identity politics, where for short-term political gain, politicians have set us against each other. We've become such a divided country. We're divided along the lines of race, religion, culture, ethnicity, so many different things. And that's fostered an environment of perpetual hostility and grievance. And where those things fester, we do see violence, whether that's gun violence or other types of violence. The underlying factors are often the same. And so we really need to start looking at how we engage with each other, how we can respectfully disagree with each other, and how we conduct public debate in a way that doesn't further inflame division in society.
Samara, we've only got about a minute left, but I'm just wondering very quickly, is there still a case for tougher gun laws? Because nobody needs 6 weapons, and should anybody hold a licence indefinitely?
The licences already are time limited, so there's no such thing as an indefinite licence. As to the rest, ultimately, if we're serious about reducing firearm violence, let alone other forms of violence, we actually need to look at the evidence and take a close look at what works, rather than just grabbing things that sound good or may make people feel safe. We need to really address the problems here, not look for quick fix solutions.